Welcome to session 3. So we shall start by running our server. So let's open our terminal and run python manage.py run server. So our application is running. So let's go to our browser and we access it. So it's like our CSS is not loading. Let's check if there is anything wrong with CSS. I think in our configuration, settings.py, line 118, I think we can add a slash here. Then let's refresh. Let's refresh the page again and we see. Good. So when you refresh and it fails, you can always use Ctrl Shift and R to force a refresh. Yeah, so this is where we stopped from, and now today I want us to update our index.html. But before we do that, let us first create a Git repository where we can keep our code, because it is always good coding practice to keep version of your code. So GitHub is one of the platforms that can allow you to manage all those versions of your code, because as you're making changes, you can be able to revert back and see where you had errors when you're debugging. So right now I'm in my GitHub account. I'm already logged in, so I'll come on this plus button and go to new repository. Then I'm going to give in the name. I'm going to call it Django Employee Management System Code with Kamate. So this is, you can give it any repository name. Then the description. Then after, I'm going to leave it public, and I'll leave a link here in the description for you to check through the repository. Then I can create. So the repository has been created, as you can see. So these are some of the few commands they give you, which you can use if you're not familiar with Git. So the first one is to initialize Git on the local machine, which we are going to do. So we shall go back to our VS Code. Since this terminal is running, we can create a new terminal to handle that. And the other thing you have to know is that before you push a code to GitHub, it is always important to have a git ignore file. This file stores, it lets GitHub, it notifies GitHub about some files that shouldn't be pushed, like the env file. It contains secrets and other configurations that allow our application to run locally on our machines. Our database also contains most of our information. That's why, like our username for super user and all those other database tables. So that's why on our root directory, we are going to create a new file, and we are going to name it starting with a dot git ignore, and press enter. So when we do this, we are going to tell GitHub some things which shouldn't be pushed. So since this is a Django project, we can use this website here to generate all those files that don't have to be pushed. Just head over to gitignore.io. Then this is a Django project. Type in Django and click create. So you're gonna see this code, copy it and bring it into gitignore and paste it. So this code contains all the files, including the env files. All of them are inclusive here. So these ones don't have to be pushed. All these ones here. Yeah, and also our database is inclusive. So having done that, we can now initialize. So git init. So here we have initialized the Git repository. We can add the remote. The remote is the remote repo which we shall be basing on when we are pulling and pushing in changes. So we copy this command for remote. So this is, it ends with git, then press enter. So we have now added the remote. After adding a remote, the other thing we need to do now is to add in the whole of this code which we have here. So we use git add with a dot. So the dot means that we are adding in everything. Press enter. Good. So when we have done that, we can now commit with a message. I'm going to call it an initial commit. So After that, we can now be able to push this code to GitHub. So git push origin master. So master is the branch. By default, when you create a repo, it comes with the master branch. It is either master or main, so you can always check in the GitHub account to check the exact name. So when you get back to Git and refresh this page, we are going to find out that we have all our code here. All our code, we already have it here with our commit. So here we are now good to go. So having done that, so our Git is now well set. Let me close most of these tabs here. We can now be able to handle the index.html and base.html. So I have made a simple base.html and an index to create a welcoming landing page, which is okay. So I'm going to share all those files which I've used in a link down here in the description. At the same time, you can find them in the Git repo which I have just created. So to start with, you are going to change our base.html and our index.html, and you are going to replace them with this one which is here. So this is my base.html. Under templates, we are going to come to base.html. They are just HTML files. So this is base.html. We are going to replace it with this one. So we are replacing. Yes, it has been replaced. We are going to do the same for index.html. We can first delete index here, then we bring the other one from here. This is index.html. Can drag and drop it here. Well, this is good. Then we also have to update the CSS because this base.html and index comes in with new classes. So we are going to delete this style.css, and then we replace it with this one which I've also prepared and which is in the link in the description. You can also copy and use it here. So we are putting it here. From here, we can now be able to refresh our, let's check if our server is still running before we refresh. Yes, it is running. So let's refresh the page and we see how our home page looks like. Yeah, so this is a beautiful home page. So it has just been created using normal HTML and CSS. You can copy the code from there. So from here, having seen our good home page, we are now going to like if this is a landing page, we don't expect to see the word dashboard here because dashboard should only be seen to people who are logged in. So we are going to come to our base.html which has this header, and we just write some simple logic in the template to only display dashboard if a user is logged in. So if a user is logged in, they should be able to see the dashboard, and else then they should be able to see the login button. So let's go to our base.html and we configure that out. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see well. So this is our base.html. When we scroll down here where we have dashboard, we can write some if function. We can have some logic by opening curly braces, percentage, and then we say if user dot is authenticated. If user dot is authenticated, so if the user is authenticated, we should be able to show them the dashboard. Else, open curly braces, else if, or we can just say else since this is just one condition. If a user is authenticated, we are showing them the dashboard. Else, we show them the login page. And then we can end our if statement from here. And if. So these are the normal if statements that we write in Python. So when we come back to this page and we try refreshing the page, the home page will disappear. But if the user logs in, for example, let me log into the admin panel, /admin. I'm going to log in using a super user, the one we created in the previous session. So since I'm logged in, if I refresh this page, I should be able to see dashboard and login should disappear. So that is something which you have to mind about. And then the other thing, clicking on the button go to dashboard takes us to the dashboard. However, this is not always good because someone who is not logged in can also come and go to the dashboard directly. So what we have to do, we can also go and we apply some logic to ensure that only authenticated users are the ones to be able to go to the dashboard. So we do that by going to this dashboard URL, to the dashboard views, the one which is rendering the dashboard.html. So instead of leaving it blank, we have what we call decorators. So we can apply a decorator that is going to first check whether a user is logged in before it displaying the dashboard. And we do that by adding on top here a decorator which starts with an at login required, then open brackets. Now you specify the login URL. So our login URL, as we configured previously, we had named it login. Then we have to import this. We import this one from Django.contrib.auth.decorators import login required. So when we do this, it means that whenever before this dashboard.html is rendered, it has to first check whether the user is logged in. Let's try to check if that one has been implemented. We go back to our dashboard. So currently the user is logged in. Let's try to log out. So when we log out and then we come to the dashboard, we refresh. When we refresh, even the other dashboard button will disappear. So clicking on go to dashboard, there is an error, reverse for login not found. Let's check. I think we have not yet created the login function. Yeah, we haven't created yet the login function. Yeah, but we are going to do that. Let's check our urls.py. Yeah, we don't have login at the moment, and actually it's the next thing we are going to do. So let us first handle the login. So under login, we are going to allow a user to log into our system, in that if, for example, a user clicks on login, they should be able to get a form. After getting a form, they can enter their username and password and then log in. On logging in, it's when they can be able to manage all the things we have to do with our system, employees, payouts, and all the other stuffs, including reports. So let us handle the login first. So the login, we are going to come to our employee system, urls.py, and then we are going to create a path. So this path, we are going to call it login, and this one is going to be handled by views.login, and I'm going to give it a name of login. So having done that, we can now be able to write the views for the login in our views.py. So we're going to create a function, and this function we're going to call it login. This function is going to take up a request and is going to return render. It's going to render a page, the request, with login.html. So it means that you have to create this file, login.html. I already have this file created, so I'm going to just copy it and paste it here under templates, and at the same time it is attached in the description. So let me grab it here. This is login.html. Yes, our login.html is here, and let's now try to refresh the page. Good. So clicking on login should be able to take us to the login form. So let's go to the base.html and we configure that. Our base.html is here, then our login button is this one here. So we are going to give it a reference, open curly braces, %% URL of login. So we called it login. So let's get back here, refresh the page. Invalid block. Let's check what's happening on base.html line. Base.html, there is line 31. I think we made a small typo. This was URL, so always be careful when you're typing these words. Let's check if our server is still running. Yes, let's refresh the page. Good. So clicking on login opens up this login form. Now after you have opened up the login form, a user should be able to enter their username and password and then be able to access the dashboard. So let's do that quickly. We are going to first receive user input, the username and the password which they have input. Then after validating, we allow them to log into the system. So let's do that one. Let's get back to our views, which is rendering the login. So from here, we are going to start by checking if the data we are receiving, or we are going to start by seeing whether the information you are getting from the user is either a post or a GET request. So since these users are sending in information, this is a post request. So if request.method is post, if the request.method is post, what should we do? So we can receive the username and the password. So we are creating two variables for storing what the user has input. So, and how do we get that? So we are going to get request.post, because this information which is coming from the form comes with the post request. So this is request.post. Then dot we now get the what? If we check in our form, our fields have names. So if we check in our login.html is here. Then we check our username label. Its name is username, and then the password, its name is password. So these are the ones we are bringing here in views. So we are getting the username. Then for the case of the password, we are getting request.post.get password. So these are the field names. Then having gotten this, we now have to verify whether this user exists. So in Python, you have a function which can help us do that. It's called the authenticate function. It is inbuilt function which can help us compare the username and the password with the ones which are already in our database. And then if they exist and match, we can be able to direct the user to the dashboard. So this function comes from the Django.contrib.auth. Import authenticate. So now from here, we are going now to create a variable. We can call it anything, but for my case, I'm calling it user. So user, then we call the authenticate function. So this authenticate function takes in the request and then tries to check whether the username in the database really matches the username that we have entered on top here. At the same time, it goes ahead to go and check whether the password we have in our database matches the password that we are just receiving from the user. So after it has done that, we can check if the result of this user is not none. So if user is not none, if user is not none, it means that the user has been returned. So what can we do? We can now allow them to go to the dashboard because a user exists. So we render the request, and we can render this request with the dashboard HTML, which is under dashboard.html. So how about if the user does not exist? You have to display a certain error to the user. So else we can create a simple error message, a simple variable maybe to hold the error message. So we can call it invalid username or password. So now after that, we now have to, if the user has invalid username and password, then we have to return them to the very form. So we return render the request with the login.html, but we also add in a context for the error message. So a context is a small dictionary which we can use when we are displaying such error messages in the form directly. So we are going to have this field error message like this, mapped to error message. So having done this, if a user is able to provide the correct credentials, we'll be able to log in. Else they should receive this error. So this error message, we can get where to place it within the form, so that it can be able to appear whenever a user enters wrong credentials. So let's get to our login.html. We can always display the error message just below the form. Below the form here, we can just create a simple div like this one. Can create a simple div like this one, and this one we are going to call it just going to put in a small paragraph, and now within this paragraph we display in the error message, of which it is in our variable, the variable here in views.py. It is in this variable error message. So we get this variable error message and we bring it here. Good. So let's go to our, let's check if the server is still running. Yes, the server is running. Let's refresh the page. Yes. So this is the home page. From the home page we can be able to log in. When we click on login and we enter the correct credentials, we can click on login, and dashboard template does not exist, so I think we have to check if, I think this is a small typo, dashboard. Let's get back to our views.py. So this is dashboard. Let's get back here and refresh the page. Continue. Good. So this is our dashboard. Now, having done that, clicking on go to dashboard directly does not allow a user to go to dashboard. Instead, as you can see even from this URL, it first prompts the user to log in. That is the decorators that we have designed in there. So that is how a user is able to log into the system. If they enter wrong password and click on login, they should be able to get this message here, invalid username or password. So our users can now be able to get authenticated and they can be able to log in. So